Every day, the human body receives many different kinds of information. Information from others, information from the environment, and information from the body itself. Much of this information requires a response, a change in the body's action or behavior. Such information is called a stimulus, and it is carried from the senses to the brain by an intricate network of communication and control, the human nervous system. The work of the human nervous system begins here, with a neuron or nerve cell, a tiny structure designed to receive and send communication signals, which are also called impulses. This is an actual still photo of neurons sending and receiving impulses. The photo was produced in a remarkable freezing process developed by Dr. John Heuser of Washington University in St. Louis. Dr. Heuser takes a living neuron sample. He places it on a plunger. The neuron is stimulated with an electrical charge which causes it to fire an impulse. At the same instant the cell fires the impulse, it is slammed against a super cold copper plate that instantly freezes the cell in its moment of action. The neuron is then transferred to a vacuum chamber where it is freeze-dried and its top layer is scraped off. Finally, the neuron is placed in the scanning electron microscope where it is photographed at a magnification of more than 1/2 times. The resulting highly magnified photos, or micrographs, reveal more about the neuron than has ever been known before. As the primary structure on which the nervous system is built, the neuron is composed of the cell body and its extensions. The dendrites are thin microscopic extensions found on all sides of the nerve cell. The dendrites carry nerve impulses toward the cell body. The axon, a single thick extension, carries impulses away. The end of each axon lies close to the dendrites of the next neuron, but the cells do not actually touch. There is a tiny gap between them called the synapse. Although the synapse prevents the neurons from physically connecting, it is small enough to allow chemical signals to pass between the nerve cells. One of these chemical signals is acetylcholine, a chemical which helps transmit impulses between neurons. Acetylcholine is produced at the end of an axon. It crosses the synapse and instantly causes a new nerve impulse to start in the dendrites of the next neuron. Since acetylcholine and other chemical signals are produced only in the ends of the axons and not in the dendrites, the signals can travel in only one direction. Many of the chemicals in the nervous system are neurotransmitters. A neurotransmitter is any substance released by nerve endings that transmits an impulse to another neuron, a muscle, or a gland. After a neurotransmitter has delivered its message, it is destroyed by other chemicals in the nervous system. This prevents the body from receiving false messages. In people with Parkinson's disease, the chemicals which transmit nerve impulses are missing. As a result, the muscles tremble uncontrollably and refuse to obey conscious commands. Healthy nerve cells contain a balance of ions, ions being positively or negatively charged atoms. Because of these ions, the movement of nerve impulses through individual nerve cells involves both chemical and electrical changes. Before a neuron transmits an impulse, its outside layer is composed of electrically positive ions. Its inside layer is composed of electrically negative ions. When the neuron is at rest, there is no movement of chemicals into or out of the cell. When the neuron is stimulated, electrical and chemical changes occur. At the stimulated point, The outside of the nerve cell becomes negative, and the inside becomes positive. The ions change places. As soon as the impulse passes, the stimulated point returns to its original electrical and chemical state. The passage of the nerve impulse along the cell causes a similar pattern of changes throughout the neuron. Before individual parts of the cell can pass another impulse, they must rest. In some neurons, this recovery period is as brief as 1/1000th of a second. Neurons in the brain and spinal cord form a unit that is called the central nervous system. The central nervous system is one of the two main parts of the human nervous system. The other part is the peripheral nervous system. The peripheral nervous system is composed of 43 pairs of nerves leading from the brain and spinal cord to other parts of the body. The brain and spinal cord together control billions of neurons, 9 billion of which form the brain alone. Together, the brain and spinal cord are a single unit. Impulses are sent to the brain and spinal cord from every part of the body. Impulses received in one region of the spinal cord can be carried to other regions of the cord or to the brain. Some nerve cells are covered with protective sheaths called neurolemma. Although scientists still do not know the exact function of neurolemma, they seem to be related to a neuron's ability to regenerate injured parts. Neurons in the brain and spinal cord do not have neurolemma. They cannot regenerate injured parts. Any damage to these neurons is permanent. This is why brain and spinal cord injuries are serious. In a healthy brain and spinal cord unit, the chemical signals sent from the different sensory neurons are the same. An impulse sent from neurons in the toe is chemically identical to an impulse sent from neurons in the nose. But the impulses are received in different areas of the brain, which translate them as different experiences, such as smell, touch, or taste. After the brain translates the impulses from the sensory neurons, it sends impulses back through the nervous system to produce a response. The response is a physical action involving many parts of the body. The neurons responsible for carrying the response message throughout the body are motor neurons. They carry impulses from the brain and spinal cord to the muscles and glands. Muscles and glands which receive a response message are called effectors. In the muscle effectors, an impulse from a motor neuron produces a contraction. In the gland effector, an impulse from a motor neuron produces a secretion. When information is passed from the sensory receptors to the brain and spinal cord, and then back through the motor neurons, the pathway is called a reflex arc. The knee jerk is one familiar reflex arc. When the doctor hits the patient's knee, stretch receptors in the knee stimulate a sensory neuron which sends an impulse to the spinal cord. The spinal cord forwards the message to a motor neuron, which carries the message to the muscles. The muscles contract, producing the jerk. This reflex arc is one of the simplest found in humans. Most reflex arcs involve additional neurons called intermediary or association neurons, which pass impulses through the spinal cord to the motor neuron. Many other reflexes involve thousands of neurons which can either inhibit or increase your body's response. Responses in the peripheral nervous system are specialized, so specialized that they are thought of as subsystems of the peripheral nervous system. These subsystems include the somatic nervous system, the autonomic nervous system, the sympathetic nervous system, and the parasympathetic nervous system. The somatic nervous system controls skeletal muscles. These are the muscles which respond voluntarily to the outside world and are consciously controlled by the brain. They allow us to walk, run, play soccer, and do many other things we actively choose to do. The action of the autonomic nervous system occurs without being consciously directed. The autonomic nervous system includes the motor neurons that control the smooth muscles of the internal organs and the cardiac muscles of the heart. The autonomic nervous system gives us the urge to urinate. It regulates heart action. It prepares the body for sexual activity and regulates the work of the sweat glands. The sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system are both part of the autonomic nervous system. These two subsystems have exactly opposite effects. The sympathetic nervous system prepares the body quickly when a stress situation arises. It releases adrenaline into the circulatory system. It increases the rate the heart beats. It raises blood pressure and blood sugar content. It dilates the pupils, increases the action of the sweat glands, causes hair to stand up, and directs blood from the smooth muscles to the skeletal muscles, where it is most likely to be needed. The changes brought on by the sympathetic nervous system are sometimes called fight or flight reactions. They help one to handle stress situations, as when high adrenaline levels allow people to run very fast. The parasympathetic nervous system inhibits or reduces organ action. It slows down the heartbeat, constricts the bladder, decreases secretions from the sweat glands, and brings the conditions produced by the sympathetic nervous system back to normal. Made of all these parts, the human nervous system is a perfectly balanced mechanism which allows the body to operate at its most efficient level. But the system is affected by everything from food to drugs. Two everyday items which have tremendous effects on the human nervous system are caffeine and nicotine. As an ingredient in both coffee and cola, caffeine is a powerful stimulant. It speeds up the entire nervous system, increasing the rate the heart beats and raising blood pressure. The nicotine in cigarettes also has a great effect on the nervous system. High doses of nicotine depress the system, reducing the ability of neurons to send messages. Of all the substances affecting the nervous system, alcohol is among the best understood. In the brain, it paralyzes the center of emotional control, releasing inhibitions. Next, the vision and speech areas are affected. There is blurred or double vision and slurred speech. As it continues to move through the brain, alcohol blocks the flow of impulses to the motor neurons. There is a loss of muscular coordination, resulting in dizziness and an inability to walk. If enough alcohol has been consumed, neurons in the brain will become so paralyzed that the drunken person slips into unconsciousness. Without direction from the brain, heart and digestive action slow down, as does respiration. The person may even die. Drugs have a variety of effects on the nervous system. L-Dopa, which is used to treat Parkinson's disease, imitates dopamine, a natural transmitter substance. Phenobarbital is a drug used to slow down the overactivity of neurons in the brain. It is especially useful in controlling epileptic seizures. Depressants affect the nervous system by slowing nerve impulses and sometimes blocking them completely. Amphetamines affect the nervous system by speeding up nerve impulses. They can be effective in controlling sleeping sickness. Psychedelics and marijuana seem to affect every part of the nervous system, but the long-term consequences of using these drugs is not yet known. The nervous system is also affected by drugs the brain itself manufactures. Although little is known about these drugs, many appear to be painkillers, such as endorphins, which are produced when the body goes into shock. Endorphins pose just one puzzling question about the nervous system. Many questions remain. Questions that may soon be answered, now that we can actually see the nervous system at work. Now that we can identify its parts and watch them function. All of which will help us come to a new understanding of its mysteries.